Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take complex, often really overwhelming source material, and we turn it into actionable, crystal clear insights for you.
That's the mission.
And today, we are undertaking a really critical one. We're diving deep into the operational strategies for managing cravings and urges.
The ones related to substance use, yeah. Alcohol, tobacco, other drugs.
And we are pulling directly from therapeutic guidance chapters. I mean, these are literally the blueprints used in early recovery to help people overcome these incredibly powerful internal drives.
That's right. And look, when someone decides to change a really deep-seated behavior like substance use, they often run headfirst into this wall, and that wall is the craving.
And they think it's all about willpower.
They do.
Yeah.
People mistakenly rely solely on willpower. But what the professional guidance shows, and we're really analyzing today, is that managing these urges is a structured, measurable skill set. It's not magic.
So it's about transforming that subjective, really intense internal struggle.
You do objective data, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we're moving from the chaos of feeling overwhelmed to the clarity of an actual methodology.
A plan.
Right. And our blueprint today has three main goals for you, the listener. First, mastering the strategies to prevent or manage cravings.
Mm-hmm.
Second, the non-negotiable discipline of tracking them daily.
So important.
And third, the critical process of systematically identifying your triggers so you can plan robust coping strategies. It's a hands-on guide, and we're about to break it down.
And this methodology is so essential because we are dealing with systems that are mediated by, deep biological learning.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, when we talk about triggers, we're really talking about classical conditioning. Pavlovian responses where the brain, and specifically the amygdala region, that's our threat and fear center, it just lights up in anticipation of the reward.
So the goal of all these techniques we're going to talk about.
It is to learn to regulate that core neurological response, which is literally screaming at you to seek the substance.
Okay, let's unpack this and start with the language itself. Before we can track and manage a craving, we have to define it. The source material makes a distinction that might seem subtle, but it's fundamentally important for management.
It's everything.
What is the difference between a craving and an urge?
And that distinction provides the key to intervention. A craving is defined simply as a strong longing or an intense desire.
Just the feeling of wanting.
Just the wanting. But that longing can be complex. It might be for the immediate positive effects, the euphoria, the high, the relaxation, or it can be driven by something called negative reinforcement.
Which is?
The desire to escape unpleasant moods, emotional stress, or even just the physical misery of withdrawal symptoms. It's the emotional and cognitive state of wanting something to stop or start.
Okay, so if the craving is the state of wanting, what is the urge?
The urge is the behavioral intention to act. It's the moment that desire shifts from just being a feeling to becoming a plan.
Oh.
And the sources emphasize this over and over. You can feel a strong, painful, powerful craving, a longing that is just intense, with relatively little intention to actually act on it.
So you can feel it without feeling like you have to do something about it.
You can acknowledge the desire without feeling compelled to move toward the substance. However, when the urge is high, when that specific intention to use is present and it's gaining momentum,
That's the danger zone.
that is the moment your vulnerability to relapse skyrockets. That is the point of no return where you need a rapid, planned coping strategy instantly.
So the craving is the internal pressure building up, and the urge is, it's like your finger is hovering over the button.
Perfect analogy.
The core value of this entire deep dive, then, is to identify that pressure, measure it, analyze where it's coming from, and then intercept the intention before that button gets pushed.
Precisely. We are turning that internal chaos, that massive pressure, into a structured, manageable problem.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. The spectrum of the craving itself. These aren't like monolithic experiences, are they?
Not at all. The sources describe cravings varying massively in intensity, from just a mild background thought to something extremely powerful and all-consuming.
Critically, they are not always transparent. They're not always obvious. You categorize them as overt or covert.
That's right.
Covert cravings are the ones that scare me most from a listener's perspective. Because if you don't know what's happening, how can you possibly fight it? If a craving is hidden, how does it even manifest?
They show up indirectly. Often they're somaticized. They manifest as irritability, restlessness, unexplained tension, or even physical discomfort.
You just feel off.
You feel off, yeah. An individual might report feeling anxious or on edge, and they'll attribute it to their job or their spouse or traffic. when in fact, it's the physical manifestation of a latent, unacknowledged craving for the relief that substance used to provide.
Right.
This is why individuals early in recovery must learn to recognize how their cravings show up physically and behaviorally, not just mentally as a simple, I want to use.
That brings us right to the structured analysis the source material provides in what they call Figure 8.1, the causal chain of vulnerability. It's essentially a forensic map of how a person moves from an outside stimulus to a relapse risk.
It is. It's a flowchart of disaster, if you will.
Can you walk us through that specific path step by step? Maybe using a quick scenario.
Absolutely. Let's map it out. The process always begins with triggers, which are either external, so environmental, or internal, emotional. Let's use an example of an external one. A client walks past their old favorite bar on the way home. That's the external trigger.
Simple enough. What happens next in the sequence?
That trigger immediately activates a complex internal state. Thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. The thought might be, it's been a rough day, one drink won't matter. The feeling might be a surge of excitement mixed with anxiety.
And the behavior.
The behavior might be just slowing their walk or turning their head toward the door. This internal manifestation is the crucial second step.
And then these internal shifts,
Yeah,
they translate into physical reality.
exactly. Those thoughts, feelings, and behaviors then manifest as physical and psychological signs and symptoms. The client might feel their heart start racing, their palms sweat, or they might feel this overwhelming restlessness.
Okay, and those observable symptoms then contribute to the perceived intensity of the craving, which they would then rate on our scale we'll talk about.
Right, from 0 to 5. And this measurable intensity then dictates the final step, the deployment of one or more coping strategies. The whole goal of this framework is to teach you to intercept that flow at the first, second, or third step, well before the intensity becomes unmanageable.
That breakdown makes it terrifyingly clear that a craving isn't just a mental wish. It is a full-body, acute stress response. The sources sometimes call it drug hunger.
That's a great term for it.
What are the specific physical and behavioral symptoms detailed that a listener should be monitoring for?
We're talking about a full physiological hijack. It's reminiscent of the fight or flight response, often mediated by the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, being activated.
So your body is in crisis mode.
It is. Physical manifestations include acute anxiety, palpable tension, profuse sweating, notably sweaty palms, and a racing heart. Behaviorally, a person might display excessive energy, a constant need to fidget, significant restlessness, unexplained stomach distress, or, paradoxically, they might suddenly start actively avoiding people.
Isolating themselves just when they need support the most.
Exactly.
The physiological link is key because it explains why just deciding not to so often fails. The body is essentially screaming for the substance to turn off this physical distress signal.
It is. The body is seeking immediate chemical relief from an intensely uncomfortable stress-mediated state. This is why addressing the physical symptoms through behavioral strategies like exercise or meditative techniques like urge surfing is so vital. You need to calm the amygdala down, not just talk yourself out of a bad idea.
And the most dangerous variable in this whole process seems to be time. People, especially in early recovery, might assume that once they stop using, the cravings will just vanish. But the sources stress that cravings can persist for long periods, even years.
And they remain a continuous risk factor. That is absolutely correct. While they are usually most frequent and strongest in the early phases, the conditioning is so deep.
I mean, we see clinical reports of individuals, particularly those with long-term addiction to substances like heroin, reporting intense, almost primal drug hunger years later.
We do. But the silver lining, and this is important, is that while the risk never hits zero, the data consistently shows that cravings decrease significantly in both frequency and peak intensity over the course of the recovery process.
So the immense challenge then
Is surviving those initial 90 days of peak intensity to give the brain time to rewire and calm down.
which brings us directly to the first major piece of actionable methodology, monitoring. You can't manage a data set you don't possess.
This is foundational, and it's about establishing what we call an internal locus of control. The first step toward gaining control is learning to label and quantify the desire. Is it an urge, a craving, or is it just discomfort?
And daily tracking helps with that.
It accomplishes two things. It forces you to remain highly vigilant, and it allows you to see quantitative evidence of how cravings truly wax and wane over time. It takes that subjective, overwhelming experience and makes it an objective, manageable project.
Let's talk about the specific tool provided for this, the intensity scale from Worksheet 8.1. How is this structured to capture the data they need?
This tool requires rating the average intensity of your cravings each day using a simple 0 to 5 scale. And you do it separately for alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs, so you're only focusing on what's relevant to you.
Okay, so what do the numbers mean?
0 means absolutely night. No desire was present all day. A 1 is very low intensity, maybe a momentary fleeting thought you dismissed easily.
And the middle range.
A 2 or a 3 represents moderate intensity. The desire was present for a significant portion of the day. It required conscious effort to manage, but it never felt overwhelming.
And the high end of the scale.
A 4 or 5 represents severe craving intensity. The desire was consuming, required intense, constant focus and active use of coping skills, and presented a real threat of relapse.
I have a slight challenge here. If the client is asked to rate the average intensity, couldn't that be misleading? What if you have 3 days of solid 1 ratings, but on day 4 you experience a 15-minute spike at a 5 intensity? The average might still look low, but it masks that dangerous spike.
That's a highly intelligent question, and it speaks to the limitations of any retrospective rating scale.
So how does the guidance address that?
The guidance acknowledges that the average rating is primarily useful for spotting the overall trend, that long-term decrease we talked about. However, the best clinical practice, often included in the expanded version of this worksheet, requires the client to track 3 things: the average, the peak intensity for the day, and specifically to note the context or situation surrounding any rating of a 4 or a 5.
So you do capture the spike.
You have to. If that 15-minute 5 spike happens, you must use the worksheet to record. High-risk moment at 6 p.m. when I received a stressful phone call. It's the combination of the trend analysis from the average and the forensic analysis of the spike's context that generates the critical knowledge.
That makes sense. The data points you toward the trigger, and the sources strongly emphasize a certain high-risk period where this kind of vigilance is absolutely non-negotiable.
Absolutely. The clinical evidence overwhelmingly points to the first 90 days of recovery as the period of highest risk for relapse.
The first 3 months.
This is the window where the brain is actively detoxifying and recalibrating, and the conditioned responses are still just overwhelming. Tracking during this period is essential because every single day you rate a 1 instead of a 5, it reinforces the progress.
It provides tangible evidence that the cravings do lessen.
Which is a powerful source of hope when you feel hopeless.
Let's ground this in the real world by discussing the case study of Sharon, which the material uses to illustrate this tracking pattern. What did her record reveal about the trajectory of her cravings?
Sharon's experience demonstrates the textbook pattern we hope to see. For the first 2 to 3 weeks of her abstinence, her daily ratings were almost universally at the severe level, 4s or 5s, every day.
Wow, that must have been brutal.
That's the painful grind of early recovery. However, in weeks 3 through 6, the ratings softened slightly, settling into a moderate to severe bandso 2s to 4s.
So there's progress.
There is. By the 2nd and 3rd months, the intensity and frequency continued to decrease, showing a clear, general downward trend over that 90-day window. This visual proof on paper is what prevents someone from saying, this is impossible, it's never going to get easier.
So the general trend is hopeful, but as we discussed, daily tracking is also the alarm system for dangerous anomalies. What did Sharon's records show about temporary spikes?
This is where the monitoring paid off. Around 6 weeks into her abstinence, despite the general downward trend, she suddenly experienced a severe craving spike again, rated it a 5.
Okay, so what happened?
Because she was maintaining her vigilance, she was able to cross-reference this spike with her daily activities and emotions. She discovered the spike occurred immediately after a highly upsetting conflict with her partner over a relationship boundary.
So it wasn't random.
Not at all. The critical insight was that the craving was strongly connected to relationship stress and the resulting negative emotional state.
And that specific connection linking emotional stress to increased vulnerability is the knowledge that allows you to plan future coping. It transforms a vague feeling of, I just wanted to use, into, when my partner and I argue, I experience a severe trigger and I need a planned intervention.
That's the entire point. Monitoring isn't about assigning a number. It's about conducting forensic data analysis on your own internal state to identify the specific variables, the whys that cause the most danger, and those whys are the triggers.
So we've moved from measuring the fire to methodically identifying the fuel source. Identifying triggers is the next structural step, using a tool like Worksheet 8.2.
Right. This allows you to anticipate high-risk situations and proactively plan your coping strategies rather than just scrambling in the moment of crisis.
And triggers, as we mentioned, fall into two essential categories, external and internal.
External triggers are those overt or subtle environmental cues that the brain has been deeply conditioned to associate with substance use.
Let's focus first on external triggers, the environment and the social sphere. Let's break down the types the sources cite, starting with what has to be the highest risk, people.
Common people triggers are those who facilitate or are actively involved in substance use. This goes beyond the obvious, like drug dealers or drinking buddies.
Right.
It includes partners or roommates who still use substances in the home, coworkers who take smoke breaks every hour, or even old friends you haven't seen in years whose presence alone reminds you of past use.
And the challenge there is the emotional labor. It's hard to cut off a friend, but that association makes them a threat level 4 or 5.
It does.
And the places and situations, these are often the easiest to anticipate, but sometimes the hardest to fully avoid in daily life.
They cover any location or event where the substance was previously used. This ranges from general environments like bars, clubs, or the office to highly specific places.
Right?
Like the street corner where they bought drugs, a specific easy chair in their home, or even their own car if that was the location of use.
And situational triggers.
Things like high-stress environments, parties, family holidays, business meetings, or the routine of afterward happy hours. The goal in the early phase is maximum avoidance. You have to minimize those environmental cues.
Now we get into the deep conditioning, the objects and sensory cues. These are often the most subtle and, I think, surprising triggers.
They are. These are the objects or sensory inputs that, through years of repetition, have become inextricably linked to the reward pathways. It could be the simple sight or smell of the substance itself, the scent of specific alcohol or tobacco smoke, but often it's highly specific items.
You mean paraphernalia?
Drug paraphernalia, exactly. Lighters, specific ashtrays, mirrors, rolled up money, needles, pipes, or even specific types of mixer bottles used for alcohol. When the brain sees these, it anticipates the reward, and the craving response is activated instantly.
The sources provide a really interesting sensory example using music to illustrate how far this conditioning can extend.
Yeah, the case of Ryan. Ryan was in recovery from marijuana use, and he discovered that specific genres of music, usually high-energy tracks associated with partying, were powerful recurring triggers for him.
Just the music itself.
Just the music. If he heard those songs while riding in the car or exercising, he experienced a severe craving. Even though there were no substances physically present, he had to replace that music entirely. It shows that even a highly specific auditory cue can maintain a powerful, conditioned connection.
And the ritualistic cues often tied to substances like tobacco or alcohol, which are so integrated into the daily flow.
For smokers, the ritual is often the most difficult trigger to break. The most common triggers mentioned are the first cup of coffee in the morning, the 10 a.m. break, the end of a good meal, or finishing a phone call.
It's automatic.
It's not about the nicotine itself initially, but the habit built around the action. The hand just goes out for the cigarette automatically because the ritual is so deeply ingrained. You have to find an immediate, healthy replacement for that specific moment of ritual.
Now let's turn inward to the internal triggers, the feelings, thoughts, and physical sensations that drive the behavior. The sources are clear that this is where the highest relapse risk really resides.
Internal triggers include feelings, thoughts, memories, or physical sensations. And we have to emphasize this point for the listener. Negative emotional states are cited as the single most common relapse risk factor.
The single most common.
Yes. This includes the entire spectrum of psychological discomfort: anxiety, overwhelming anger, profound boredom, situational depression, or acute frustration. If your primary or only developed coping mechanism for these feelings was substance use, your vulnerability remains critically high until you learn new, effective distress tolerance skills.
How does the guidance suggest addressing something like chronic boredom, which seems so benign but can lead straight to seeking a dopamine hit?
Boredom is insidious because it represents a lack of internal stimulation, which the substance instantly fixes. The guidance stresses preemptive planning.
So get ahead of it.
You have to. If you know you usually get bored on Sunday afternoons, you must schedule structured activities, not just vague plans, but committed actions like a planned hike, a recovery meeting, or a specific creative project. You eliminate the vacuum before the negative feeling of boredom has time to generate the thought, I should just get high.
But it's not only the negative landscape. The materials also caution that positive feelings and thoughts can be equally dangerous triggers.
Absolutely. The positive triggers are often the most deceptive because they feed into rationalization.
What do you mean?
These are thoughts and memories that minimize the problem or romanticize past use. Examples include, I've been sober for 3 months, I clearly don't have a problem anymore, I can handle one.
The classic one.
Or thoughts that emphasize a skewed positive association, like, I remember that intense conversation I had last year, I was so much sharper after a few drinks. Or, as the sources note, highly specific, romanticized memories, like, sex is so much better when I'm buzzed up. These positive thoughts attempt to rationalize the action and must be identified and immediately countered with cognitive strategies.
And what about physical sensations? Beyond the immediate symptoms of the craving itself, what internal physical triggers are major threats?
The most dangerous are the distressing physical symptoms of actual withdrawal. For many substances, withdrawal is intensely uncomfortable and sometimes medically dangerous.
So the pain itself becomes the trigger.
The pain, the nausea, the tremors, the insomnia, they become powerful drivers for relapse because you know immediate relief is available by simply using again. Learning to tolerate or medicate through these physical sensations is a cornerstone of recovery.
There is also the critical time element. Dana's case study highlights how predictable some internal triggers can be.
Dana's experience shows the power of the conditioned clock. After quitting drinking, she found her cravings arrived like clockwork every afternoon at 5 p.m., her traditional cocktail hour.
Her body just expected it.
Even after months, her body was still physiologically primed to anticipate alcohol at that specific time. She also experienced spikes when visiting a highly specific context, like going to a nice restaurant, which she had always associated with enjoying fine wine. Triggers are not always chaotic. Sometimes they are highly predictable based on the time of day or deeply established routines.
Once this massive list of potential triggers, external and internal, is compiled on the worksheet, the therapeutic approach requires the final step, rating them. What is the explicit purpose of the trigger threat scale?
This is the operational intelligence phase. Once you've identified a trigger, you rate it on a 0 to 5 scale for the level of threat it represents to your sobriety.
And what do those ratings look like?
0 is no threat. You can easily dismiss it. A 1 or 2 is a low threat, requires minimal effort to manage. 3 is a moderate threat, requires a conscious but relatively simple plan.
And 4 and 5 are the big ones.
4 or 5 is a severe threat. It represents an immediate high risk of relapse, and it requires the most robust and multifaceted coping plan you can come up with.
And how does this rating help the client? How does it help you?
It allows for prioritization. You simply cannot put the same emotional energy into planning for a low-threat trigger, like seeing a distant cigarette butt on the street, as you do for a severe threat trigger, like having a massive argument with your partner.
So you focus your energy where the risk is greatest.
Exactly. The threat scale allows you to focus your energy and resources on planning the most robust, layered coping strategies for the situations that pose the highest danger, maximizing your chances of survival during those peak risk moments.
That structural approach transforms fear into a project plan. Now let's pivot to the solution, the toolkit. The source material outlines 5 major interlocking categories of evidence-based coping strategies that must be proactively prepared.
Before we detail them, let's revisit the general principle that guides the selection of these strategies. The goal is always to choose a strategy that provides a substitute payoff.
A substitute payoff.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
The substance was fulfilling a need be, it's stress relief, relaxation, emotional escape, or social ease. Therefore, the strategy you choose must provide a healthier, non-chemical way of achieving that same outcome. If the substance was an escape mechanism, the strategy must be a healthy engagement mechanism.
That means dealing with the underlying emotional deficit, not just the behavior. If you relied on alcohol to be funnier or more relaxed in social settings, avoiding alcohol isn't enough. You have to develop genuine social confidence without it.
Exactly. You must replace the function. Let's dive into the 5 categories, starting with what might be the simplest but most immediate fix. Environmental coping strategies, literally changing the scenery.
These strategies focus on physically removing the cues that activate that conditioned response we've been talking about.
The first step is the reduction of cues, and the guidance here is absolute. Remove all substances and all paraphernalia. This isn't a partial effort.
No half measures.
No, it means absolutely no stray cigarettes, no hidden bottles of alcohol, no old paraphernalia lighters, ashtrays, mirrors, pipes, nothing that remotely resembles the preparation or use ritual. Every visual reminder serves as a micro-trigger that keeps the conditioned pathways active. Eliminating them allows for the crucial process of cue extinction.
Where the brain gradually learns that seeing the environment does not lead to the promised reward.
That's it. And the second component is avoidance, which is highly practical in early recovery.
And so important.
In the initial high-risk period, the guidance is emphatic. Avoidance is not a sign of weakness. It is intelligent survival. You must avoid people, events, and places identified on your worksheet as high risk. Threat level 4 or 5.
So that means actively changing your route home to avoid the bar, turning down holiday party invitations.
Or temporarily ceasing contact with drinking buddies. This is a temporary boundary that is necessary until your coping skills are robust enough to handle high-risk exposure without immediate relapse.
Okay, moving beyond the physical environment, let's explore the internal landscape. Cognitive coping strategies. These involve mental reframing and directly challenging the thought patterns that precede the urge.
This is primarily about self-talk. It requires you to talk yourself through the craving, actively disputing the rationalizing thoughts that pop up, reminding yourself, I am capable of coping with this. This feeling is a lie. I have survived cravings before.
So you're having a conversation with yourself to talk yourself down.
It acts as a conscious intervention against the automated, conditioned thoughts.
And perspective is critical here, specifically that time factor we discussed.
You must actively engage your rational frontal lobe to counteract the emotional demands of the amygdala. This means reinforcing the memory that cravings are temporary, they always rise, peak, and pass.
And you have to remember the bad stuff.
You must actively deploy memory recall. Remember the troubles, the shame, and the negative consequences caused by using the substance. This direct recall counteracts those positive, romanticized, rationalizing thoughts we discussed earlier, like, I can handle one.
There are two specific, highly actionable techniques here: delaying gratification and the use of external support.
Delaying gratification is a core technique in cognitive behavioral therapy. The instruction is simple. Buy time.
Just wait.
Tell yourself, I will not use right now, I will wait 15 minutes, or I will wait until later this evening, or I will wait until tomorrow morning. Often, by just delaying the action, the intensity of the urge drops, and the opportunity to relapse is missed entirely.
And the other one?
For those who find value in it, the cognitive strategy also includes asking for strength and help from a higher power, which provides a psychological source of resilience and comfort to supplement the physical recovery efforts.
If cognitive coping is about changing the conversation in your head, behavioral coping strategies are about changing what your body is physically doing to break the momentum of the craving.
The most immediate strategy here is distraction. You need to distract yourself with an activity entirely unrelated to substance use.
Why does that work?
Because it forces the brain to shift its focus of attention away from the craving and onto a competing stimulus. It essentially deprioritizes the signal from the limbic system. This could be reading, calling a friend, playing a game, anything that demands conscious engagement.
And specifically, physical activity is recommended as a tool to release the physiological tension associated with the craving.
That anxious, restless energy, the tension, the sweating, the racing heart, that's the body preparing for action. You must give it a different, healthier action.
So you burn it off.
You do. Engaging in physical activity, like a brisk walk, a jog, or a workout, acts as a natural tension release. It metabolizes the stress hormones like cortisol that are surging through your system, helping to calm the nervous system down and physically interrupt the craving response cycle.
Are there any structured activities recommended to replace the use ritual?
Yes, structured activities provide purpose and continuity. The guidance recommends recording and writing in a journal about the craving experience, which reinforces that earlier tracking discipline, or reading recovery literature for help and inspiration. These structured tasks engage the mind and provide a sense of forward momentum.
They counter the paralysis that a severe craving can impose.
Exactly.
Okay. Recovery is rarely successful in isolation. The fourth category, interpersonal coping strategies, focuses on mobilizing social support, which is often the direct antidote to the shame and secrecy that fuels addiction.
These strategies emphasize connection and communication. The primary and most direct mechanism is seeking support.
Just reaching out.
It means talking to friends, family, or other supportive people, someone you trust who understands the gravity of the craving. Crucially, going to a recovery meeting and sharing your cravings aloud is cited as a direct, powerful interpersonal coping mechanism. Verbalizing the struggle immediately diminishes its power.
The sources also talk about managing high-risk relationships, both by learning assertive responses and avoiding what they call relationship setups.
This is proactive social risk management. You have to develop assertiveness skills to manage conflicts, negotiate boundaries, and deliver clear responses to situations that pressure you to use.
And avoiding setups.
More profoundly, you must actively avoid setups, relationships or encounters that systematically influence or pressure you to use, whether overtly or subtly. If dating someone who continues to use creates a severe trigger, that relationship is a high-risk zone that needs serious management or temporary avoidance.
And that's the hardest work, isn't it? Prioritizing sobriety over social comfort.
It's the hardest work, but it's the most important.
And finally, the fifth category, substitute coping strategies. This is about providing a tangible, often sensory replacement for the previous habit, filling that behavioral vacuum.
These strategies are about meeting the physical, ritualistic demands. For smokers, the focus is on oral substitutes. Chewing gum, mints, or hard candy is incredibly effective in satisfying that ingrained oral fixation that the cigarette previously fulfilled.
And what about alcohol replacement, especially in those high-risk social settings?
Beverage replacement is key. Substituting a soft drink, sparkling water, or a non-alcoholic beverage is recommended during specific times or situations associated with alcohol use. For example, if you always enjoyed a glass of wine while cooking dinner,
You replace that action with a fizzy, non-alcoholic drink.
exactly. This satisfies the ritual of having a special drink in hand without the psychoactive component.
If we look at the entire toolkit, environmental, cognitive, behavioral, interpersonal substitute, it's clear that for a severe threat trigger, you might need to combine strategies. You can't just pick one.
You absolutely must. If Sharon experiences a craving spike after a fight with her partner, that's a severe internal trigger, her coping plan isn't one step, it's layered.
So wait, what's she do?
First, she deploys an environmental strategy. She immediately leaves the room. Second, a cognitive one. She uses self-talk to delay the urge for 15 minutes. Third, an interpersonal strategy, she calls her sponsor. And fourth, a behavioral strategy. She goes for a brisk walk to metabolize the stress.
Layering these different types of strategies dramatically increases the chance of riding out the wave successfully.
It's your best defense.
We've covered the entire toolkit, but there is one specific cognitive mastery technique that deserves an extensive deep dive because it directly addresses the core psychological terror of the craving: urge surfing.
Urge surfing is a cognitive and meditative imagery technique that is essential for mastery. It directly confronts a core paralyzing belief.
Which is what?
Clients often feel that they must satisfy their craving, or they will suffer intense negative relief withdrawal symptoms, emotional pain, unless they instantly give in. This belief creates an unbearable sense of psychological urgency.
And that urgency turns the craving into a crisis. So how does urge surfing fundamentally reframe your relationship with that pressure?
Urge surfing introduces the principle of acceptance. Instead of fighting the urge, trying to suppress it, push it away, or distract yourself from it, which often makes it stronger.
The don't think of a pink elephant problem.
Exactly, what we call the rebound effect. Instead of that, the client accepts the presence of the urge. You allow it to peak, you fully acknowledge its discomfort, and then you watch it subside, knowing that it is temporary and self-limiting.
And that's where the beautiful analogy comes in, the wave analogy.
The analogy is the structure for the meditation. You're instructed to visualize the urge as a rising oceanic wave. You learn to ride the wave, just like a surfer on a surfboard, keeping your balance and focus as the wave builds intensity, peaks, and then inexorably passes beneath the board.
And the key insight is that the craving, like the wave, cannot rise forever.
It must crest and then decrease. You learn to get wiped out by the sheer physical sensation of the craving without giving in to the behavioral intention to use the substance.
If the listener wants to try to understand this process right now, what is the implementation? What are the step-by-step instructions for riding that wave?
Okay, the technique is practiced in a quiet, focused state, initially when the craving is mild, so the skill becomes ingrained. When a craving hits, you deploy the following steps. First, acknowledge and accept.
So no judgment.
No fighting the sensation. You say internally, I am currently experiencing a craving. This is normal. Step 2. Focus on the surfboard, which is your breath.
The breath is the anchor.
Your breath is your balance point. Pay intense attention to it, the cool air coming in, the warm air going out.
Hmm.
Use the breath as a consistent grounding anchor to maintain awareness without getting pulled under by the emotion.
Okay, what's step 3?
Map the wave. This is a body scan. You mentally scan your body, noticing where the urge is located and how it physically feels. You observe it as if you are a scientist studying a phenomenon.
So you're asking, is it a tightness in my chest, a tremor in my hands, a knot in my stomach?
Precisely. Then, 4. Observe the ascent. As the craving intensity increases, as the wave rises, you observe the physical sensations intensify. You remind yourself, this is just chemistry, this is the conditioned response. You note the physical feeling without assigning judgment or meaning to it.
And then comes the hardest part.
Step 5. Tolerate the peak. When the craving reaches its maximum intensity, when the wave crests, you maintain your focus on your breath. This is the moment most people break. Urge surfing teaches you that even at the peak, you are still in control of your actions, even if you are deeply uncomfortable.
And the final step.
Witness the subside. Crucially, you continue to breathe and observe as the intensity naturally begins to decrease. You witness the sensation diminishing, confirming the fundamental truth. The urge is temporary. It cannot last forever.
This sounds incredibly empowering. It reframes the craving from some unstoppable force to a predictable, natural phenomenon that you can actually master.
That's the entire neurolinguistic shift. You move from being a victim of the sensation to an observer writing it out. Regular, successful practice of this meditative technique provides the cognitive confidence necessary to manage those high-intensity, conditioned urges.
And every time the wave passes and you don't use,
You are performing a small act of cue extinction. You are teaching your brain that the stimulus does not require the reward.
before we move to synthesis, we have to mention the role of medication. While these cognitive and behavioral skills are vital, they operate in conjunction with modern treatment, not in isolation.
That's an essential note for a complete view of the source material. For individuals dealing with more severe dependency, especially for opioid, alcohol, or tobacco medication-assisted treatments, are vital clinical tools.
What do they do?
These medications help manage the fundamental physiological demands by reducing the intensity and frequency of those crippling cravings. They provide the client crucial leverage. They manage the biological pressure cooker, allowing you to focus your limited energy and attention on the necessary work of recovery.
Which is learning and integrating these critical cognitive and behavioral skills like urge surfing and trigger identification.
Exactly. They work hand in hand.
This entire framework is fascinating because it fundamentally proves that managing cravings is not about some innate magical quality of willpower that you either possess or you lack.
No, not at all.
It is a structured, measurable skill set that must be learned and practiced.
Exactly. The central takeaway is that cravings are measurable, predictable, and highly manageable if you adhere to a rigid structure.
And that structure is
Continuous daily tracking to map intensity, meticulous trigger identification to find the fuel source, and finally, the proactive application of a personalized toolkit drawn from those 5 coping strategies. It is skill acquisition, skill maintenance, and objective data management, not a test of moral strength or a commentary on willpower failure.
and the sources provide a clear, implied homework assignment for anyone seeking to gain control.
The homework is continuous vigilance. Continuous tracking is non-negotiable for long-term success. That means using the daily craving record, that worksheet 8.1, consistently to track intensity trends, and meticulously updating the substance use triggers worksheet, worksheet 8.2.
Constantly rating both the intensity and the threat level of every identified trigger.
Yes. This ongoing data collection informs every coping choice and allows you to see your own success visually on paper.
So what does this all mean for you, for the listener? If active and regular practice of these coping skills, especially complex techniques like urge surfing, is necessary for them to be implemented effectively in daily life, how do you ensure consistent vigilance during periods when motivation naturally decreases? We all have periods where we feel less driven.
That raises a really important question about integrating these skills into automatic behaviors. The success in long-term recovery is not about reacting perfectly when the most dangerous wave hits. The success lies in practicing the surf before the storm even appears on the horizon. When your motivation is high, you must dedicate time to establishing the daily habit of tracking and rehearsing your coping strategies. If you ensure that the response calling your sponsor, deploying the distraction, the urge surfing meditation is integrated into your muscle memory before the low motivation, high craving spike hits, the response becomes automatic, habitual, and non-negotiable, rather than a conscious choice you have to make under duress. The skill has to be integrated before it is truly tested.